So what I'd like to study with everybody today, as we did last week, is I'd like to go through the Dvar Torah, and my friend David Schwartz of blessed memory, who fell al Kiddush Hashem, fighting for Am Yisrael, sanctifying Hashem's name. He wrote a beautiful Dvar Torah about Parshas Beshalach, and it was haunting to read it, but also inspiring. So I wanted to study that with everybody now, go through his beautiful Dvar Torah from the Sefer David, Baruch Nafshi, Divrei Torah Al Seder Parshiot HaShavua from David Schwartz. So David himself wrote this Dvar Torah, and now we study his words in his memory. So he writes as follows: L'orech Historia Yehudit, through the length of Jewish history, and it's very powerful and moving to me as we study David's words, that he has the perspective of the long view of Jewish history. Through the long view of Jewish history, many great miracles happened to our forefathers. And he cites the Midrash, because Parshas Beshalach is known primarily for the passage of the splitting of the sea. And the Midrash states, from the day that God created the world, Miyom Shabara HaKadosh Baruch Hu et ha'olam, La'ad she'amdu Yisrael al Yam, from the day God created the world until the Jewish people stood at the sea, after the splitting of the sea, Lo matzinu Adam shamar shira la'HaKadosh Baruch Hu el Yisrael. There was no person who sang praise to the Jewish people other than the Benei Yisrael. The Jewish people at the splitting of the sea were the first ones to sing praise to God. Chain bara Adam harishon, God created man, Adam. V'lo amar shira, Adam did not sing praise to God. Hitzil Avram mikivshana eish u'min ha'melachim. God saved Abraham from a fiery furnace and from the kings. V'lo amar shira, Abraham did not sing songs of praise. V'chein Yitzchak min ha'ma'achelet, God saved Isaac from the knife at the Akedah. V'lo amar shira, and Isaac did not sing praise to God. V'chein Yaakov min ha'malach, God saved Jacob from the angel. Umin Esav, God saved him from Esav. Umin Anshe Shem, and from the men of Shem. V'lo amar shira, and he did not say songs of praise. Kivin shabo Yisrael yam, once the Benei Yisrael came to the sea. V'nikra lahem, and the sea was split. Miyad amru shira lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Immediately then, at that point, the Jewish people sang songs of praise to God, as it states, Az Yashir Moshe u'Benei Yisrael. So this is the first David, and we're studying in his memory. So David is telling us that the first ones to sing praise, according to the Midrash, to God were the Benei Yisrael at the splitting of the sea. This comes from Shemot Rabbah Beshalach Chaf Gimel. Writes David, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did many great miracles for our father. But, nevertheless, until that moment where they stood at the splitting of the sea, no one sang praise to God. And the Midrash goes on and expounds, Az Yashir Moshe, then Moshe will sing. As it is written, Nachon kisacha me'az, your throne was secured from then. So the word Az appears in the song of Az Yashir Moshe, and it appears in the verse Nachon kisacha me'az. So Amar Rabbi Brachya b'shem Rabbi Avo. So says Rabbi Brachya in the name of Rabbi Avo, forever the throne of God was not secured and was not known in the world until your children sang the songs of praise. Meaning to say, when the Jewish people sang the song of the sea, that's what made God's throne secure. And that's what made God's name known in the world. And that's why it states, Nachon kisacha me'az. From that moment, your throne was secured. Mashal Melech. It's a parable to a king who made a war and he was victorious. And they made him a party and they made praise for him. And they said to him, until you did this war, you were a king. But now we've made you the emperor. So what's the difference, says the Midrash, in honor between the king and the emperor? The king stands and the emperor sits. So too the Jewish people said, in truth, up until you created the world, you were you. But now that you created the world, you are he. But now it's as though to say, Amad v'yimoded eretz. But when you stood at the sea and we said songs before you, then your throne was secure. Meaning to say, the moment the Benei Yisrael stood at the sea and crowned and recognized God publicly and sang his praise publicly, that's what made God secure in the world. Meaning to say, that's what strengthened God's throne, because the whole world now recognized him. And writes, now it's from the Midrash. All this was the Midrash Rabbah Chav Gimel. So the Chazal in this Midrash are elaborating on the incredible importance of that moment. And they said, until the splitting of the sea, God's kingdom was not fully established in the world. So David explains, we need to explain this. Why? What was it specifically about that moment that established God's kingdom in the world? What was it specifically about the splitting of the sea, and really even more than that, the singing the song of the Yashir that established God's kingdom in the world? So David always likes to bring down Hasidic explanation. So he's going to bring down two Hasidic masters. The first is the Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe. So he says, the Sfas Emes explains as follows. The children of Israel were created to testify about God. As it states in the verse, you are my witnesses. Meaning to say, what's our purpose in this world? Our purpose is to give testimony to God, to get testimony about God to the world. The world does not know who God is. It's our job to give testimony. This desire was always in the hearts of the Jewish people, writes this Sfas Emes, but they were not always able to bring it from the potential to the actual. Okay, that's what Sfas Emes writes. Sfas Emes says the Jewish people were created to give testimony about God to the world, God's greatness. And we always had this desire, but we didn't always have the ability to actualize the desire. So the Sfas Emes explains that the whole purpose of creation was to testify about the existence of God in the world. This lofty purpose, brought all of Am Yisrael together to a certain knowledge, with the recognition that God exists in the world. And when was this actualized? And at that moment, when the sea was split and all of Benei Yisrael together in a unified manner recognized the existence of God in the world and our job to testify to God's role in the world, when did that happen? That happened at this moment of the splitting of the sea, when they opened up together spontaneously in song, and they actualized their very purpose of they brought from potential to reality the purpose of their creation, which was to give testimony to God's existence in the world. So when the sea was split and the Jewish people were standing there realizing the greatness of God, at that moment they together broke spontaneously into song and testified to God, about God. That desire had been burning inside them for many years, but until that moment, they were never successful to take it and actualize it. At the splitting of the sea, each one of the Jewish people saw the greatness of God with his own eyes and said, "This is my God, and I will glorify him." We said yesterday in the Rashi, David does not write this, but we said yesterday in the Rashi that at the splitting of the sea, even the slave girl amongst them, or the maidservant amongst them, saw God with greater clarity, more than even the great prophets like Ezekiel. So at that moment, all of them saw the greatness of God and said, "This is my God, and I will glorify him." Every miracle that happened to our forefathers in Egypt happened. All the miracles that happened for the Jewish people in Egypt, and we're not referring here to the plagues, but there were many miracles that were occurring. But every miracle that occurred in an individual manner, in a private manner, to this person or to that person. But there was never, until this moment, until the splitting of the sea, there was never a miracle that happened to the entire people of the Jewish people, like one nation. Nothing had happened prior to this in a manner similar to the splitting of the sea. And the greatness of this miracle was so great that Chazal said, "Rasa shifcha hayam," the maid at the sea saw that which Ezekiel was unable to see. Writes David, Chazal chose specifically the example of the prophet Ezekiel, who we just finished, by the way, studying with our Tanakh Yomi with Rabbi Mark Gittler. Chazal chose Ezekiel specifically because Ezekiel had the highest vision of all. Ezekiel saw the what's called the Meiser Markava. And the Meiser Markava is the vision of the chariot. And so therefore, his vision was so great. So they gave the highest comparison and said it was greater. The vision of this maidservant at the sea was greater even than the greatest prophet, or one of the greatest prophets, which was Ezekiel. So after Hashem stirred the upper worlds and the lower worlds, the Jewish people were standing first and foremost united like one nation, like the children of God on a path to receiving the Kabbalat Torah. That unity, that tremendous unity, brought the nation of Israel to open up together in song and to enunciate that clear recognition of God's kingdom in the world. Let me just summarize what we're saying until now, and we'll go on in a moment. But let me just repeat it. What the Sfas Emes has been saying, as the way David has explained it, is that the whole purpose of the Benei Yisrael was to testify to the greatness of God in the world. And the Jewish people had not been able to do that until now because there had never been a miracle that happened to all of them as a nation. This was the first one. And now at this moment, everybody saw it with tremendous clarity. And so therefore, at that moment, they were able to open in praise and in song and praise the greatness of God. The Ramban writes, and he actually writes this on the previous portion, he writes, the purpose of all the mitzvot, purpose of all the commandments, is that we should believe in God and we should acknowledge to God that He's our creator. And that's the purpose of the creation. And there's no other purpose other than for us to acknowledge that God is our creator. And God does not desire anything from us below except that we should basically acknowledge God's greatness and that he created this. And Isaiah preceded Nachmanides when he said in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 21, this nation I created for myself. They are saying my praise. Meaning to say, the heavens and the earth were only created for one purpose. God created the heavens and the earth. God created the up, above and below, the kings and the angels, the stars and the sky, for one purpose, that that man should know and acknowledge God as the creator. And so through this miracle of the splitting of the sea, the Jewish people came to this just tremendous moment of breakthrough, moment of joy and recognition of God. It was like, there's this whole idea of the white light moment, which individuals have a religious epiphany. This was the religious epiphany of the nation. And that brought them to sing the praise of God. And as a result of that, to fulfill the Jewish people's purpose in the world. But we still need to understand, writes David, what was the specialness of this song? What was the uniqueness of the song? So the Netivot Shalom, the Hasidic Rebbe, Netivot Shalom, explains the significance of this song as follows. There are some types of songs which are songs of the brain, meaning to say when a Jew understands that God did kindness to him and he acknowledges the kindness and is grateful. And there are some types of songs that are songs of the heart, that his heart feels this. But above both the songs of the brain and the songs of the heart is another type of song, and that's the song of the limbs, the Shirat Ha'ivarim, the songs of the limbs. That a person is so filled with the feeling of goodness for God, of gratitude to God, and that God is so good that even his limbs are chanting the Shira. This is what the son of Rebbe calls the Shirat Ha'ivarim. This is the song that our ancestors sang at the splitting of the sea, the singing of the limbs. And that is the highest level of singing at all, that we are so grateful that all of our limbs are just bursting with song to God. Benei Yisrael said this song only specifically for the first time at the splitting of the sea, because only specifically at the splitting of the sea that did they finally understand. And this is the part which I found to be the most moving, especially reading it less than 2 weeks from David's death, Al Kiddush Hashem, is when we listen to this line. Benei Yisrael said this song only at the splitting of the sea, because it was only at the splitting of the sea did they understand that all of the struggles, all of the groanings, all the afflictions that passed over the Jewish people for all of the years, everything was done for the good from God. All of the afflictions and the pain happened as a preparation for this one moment. This song was under the expression that everything called to Avid Rahmanu Latav Avid, everything that God did for the best. Meaning to say, what David is saying is that the song of the sea was such a powerful song, was the song of the limbs. All their limbs were singing because it was at that moment that they finally recognized that they needed to go through all of those struggles and turmoils and pain in order to come to this recognition of God's greatness and to realize how God had saved them and to realize how God had created the world just for them. And that's why the Song of the Sea reflects this just complete awareness that it was all to bring us to this moment and it was all necessary. And then David quotes Rav Asher Weiss. Rav Asher Weiss is a contemporary rabbi living in Israel who actually, I read that after that last week, he dedicated one of his shiurim to David's memory. Rav Asher Weiss explains that this song is not just a simple acknowledgement of God's greatness, but recognize how the breaking forth of the heart from the turmoil of the soul and now the exalting, meaning how the heart flips from a moment of pain to a moment of joy. So that's what this song recognizes, how God has brought us from moments of pain to moments of joy. And so therefore we could understand why this song, why at that moment they reached this moment. Because at that moment, the Jewish people were finally able to see the glory of God with such clarity. And so they opened up with this exalted song. Basically, the way to understand this is to quote the words of Rav Asher Weiss, who explains why God's throne was finally established at that moment. So quotes Rav Asher Weiss as follows. That man, Adam, when he was created, did not fully understand his task. So Adam recognized the creation, but he did not sing a praise. Avram Avinu, when he was saved from the fiery furnace from the kings, had not yet been completed with the mission of Am Yisrael. Hold on one second. So Adam and Avram, they were both almost incomplete. Avram gave acknowledgement to God and he made a tithe. However, he didn't sing a song. Isaac, when he returned from the Akedah, from the near slaughter, and Jacob, when he was saved from his enemies, even though they made a big mark in the building of Israel, and the angel of Esav wanted to sing a song because Israel, Jacob, had been victorious. Nevertheless, they were still fighting, and they did not achieve completion, and they did not come to this moment. So Isaac and Jacob praised God, but they did not sing song. But when the Jewish people went up from the sea, their redemption was complete. And they were part of the army of the king. And then they opened up their hearts to sing their song. And that's when God's throne was finally secured. So basically what David is saying, his beautiful essay, and I really regret I didn't have time to talk to him about this when he was alive. His beautiful essay is saying, why is it that this song takes such a prominence in our faith? We say this song every single day. We say this song every morning. This song, when it's read, it's called Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of song. It's a beautiful tune. It's written specially in the Torah. What is it about the song? This song is not just a one-off song. This song represents the culmination of the Jewish people's awareness of their purpose in the world and the recognition that all of our struggles and difficulties and pains were all necessary to bring us to this moment of a recognition of our goal in this world, of our role in this world, which is to recognize that God is our creator and God created us for the purpose of spreading the knowledge of God in this world. And that's David's Dvar Torah on Parshas Beshalach. So I want to pause here, see if anybody has any questions about it.